Hello, everyone. Welcome to I'm Telling God About This Show. We're going to do a review of The Acolyte. It's going to be Josh and Josh today. We're going to kind of do a quick review. We'll talk through the trailer, but mainly the point that we want to bring up is some of the statements that the writer has kind of made about the show in the sense that it blurs the lines between good and evil. And we'd like to comment on that in a theological standpoint. So stick around.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into that. Well, actually, before we get into that, let me talk real quick a little bit about the context of the writer, where the writer's coming from. Is that all right, Josh?
Yeah, the director or the writer?
Yeah, the director. Sorry. So essentially, this show is in the time period or the timeline of
High Republic.
High Republic. What am I?
Is it in the High Republic? I don't know.
Yeah, it's the High Republic. Sorry. Okay, so essentially, it's the High Republic, which is about 100 years prior to the Phantom Menace. So, which is Episode 1, and kind of goes into there's some weird things going on. Jedi are being murdered and stuff like that. And you know what? Let me stop. Let me just get to the trailer, because I think we could probably, that will explain itself in there.
Yeah, while you're looking at that, it's taking place in the High Republic, where you have we have Jedi dying of mysterious causes, and the director had said something to the effect of it being like more of a murder mystery than a typical, a lot of Star Wars are the typical hero's journey, which is kind of ironic that they would go that route. I think it was a deliberate choice. Because the hero's journey requires a clear understanding of good and evil.
That's right. Yeah, and they're to their credit, like they're trying to do. I think it's based off of a particular movie style that was based on a movie called Rashomon, which is a Japanese flick that basically said it's the same event that is viewed through multiple perspectives each episode or each part of the movie. So there's different movies that kind of go about that. So we can expect to see like the same story playing out through different viewpoints.
If you saw the movie The Duel, it was a modern a more recent perspective,
vantage point with Dennis Quaid, the same kind of thing. Yeah,
where from each perspective it's things seem cut and dry one way or the other. But what's funny about that? Or what? Go ahead.
But in doing that, it's thinking it's cut and dry, and then breaking it up into different perspectives. What the intention, it seems to be, is to break down what right and wrong is, and say, well,
no, it's not even that. It's to say the notion is to say, right. Well, it's to suggest that right and wrong don't exist. They're simply just internal concepts. But here's the catch:
it's all relative.
That film style does that by establishing that the thing that changes is each individual perspective. What it does not factor in is an external moral authority. In fact, what is right or wrong has to do with your personal feelings about one person's behavior. So it works particularly well in certain like narrative driven stories, because if you tell a story like, oh, this bad thing happened to me, so like hurting people hurt people. So if you just open up on the action of the abuser, then it seems very black and white and clear.
Right.
And then if you pan to a second party that maybe has perspective into both individuals' lives, then things become a little bit more gray. And then ultimately you culminate with the perspective of the perpetrator. And now the perpetrator's story, includes the damage and the fear and the anxiety or whatever else that led to that, that then ultimately, allows the watcher, the person on the outside, finds themselves empathizing with that character, and thus basically unseating that person from their perception of like, well, I thought I knew what good and evil was, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe every bad guy's just a good guy who's misunderstood, which is, to be fair, has been the whole move of Disney for the last 10 years.
Let's reverse everything and turn it upside down. But yeah, and to be clear though too, like these movies that are based on like the Rashomon effect, where it's multiple perspectives, I don't think that they ever leave the viewer wondering who was right in it. They bring more understanding and clarity, but they leave it saying there was a moral question that was rightly answered in this. Yes, there were some gray areas, but at the end of the day, this person was wrong. And so I don't think that the that necessarily is always being pushed. It's like, no, there is no such thing as right or wrong, right? Everything is relative. So yeah, why don't we get into it? So
all right, let's go.
We'll go and pause through it as we need to make comments on it. But yeah, let's go, and here it is, Acolyte trailer.
Close your eyes. Your eyes can deceive you. We must not trust them.
It was a sound. I couldn't hear you for whatever reason. You still there?
I said,
did you mute yourself?
Yeah, no, I think I must have muted myself. I said, opening up with the premise of gaslighting is always lets you know we're getting ready to get started with some really important.
Close your eyes. Tell me you can't you can't trust your eyes. So also a little quick background with the writer, the director. She was the former assistant to Harvey Weinstein. So it's like the idea of like, close your eyes. You can't trust your eyes. It's like, what do you see? It's like, well, we know what
I'm not the bad
saw,
guy,
but didn't report
this is
on.
what
right?
everyone has to do.
I close your eyes. Tell me what you see. I don't see anything, Mr. Weinstein.
Anyway,
sorry. Go ahead.
Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself.
Tell me what comes into your mind.
You're gonna get us demonetized.
Life. Balance.
Wisdom.
I see fire.
All right, pause. All right, the kid says, I see fire, when everyone else in the class says, I see light, balance. It's like, you already kind of knew what normal was, and you go off base. Like, I feel maybe that's what happens. She's like,
right.
I had damage, and so then I just that gets you pulled, which, to be fair, if you're trying to select for the arbiters of justice and goodness, you probably don't want the girl who sees fire when she closes her eyes.
Well, also, can we also address the moral travesty here? Is he tells all the kids to close their eyes. Poor kid right here, like he's got no eyelids.
No eyelids.
Like, like you didn't really think in that position. I'm sure. Hey, like maybe his.
We'll chalk that up to other things that don't make sense. All right, moving on. Let's go. Suspend our disbelief.
Carrie Ann Moss, Trinity. Doesn't this remind you of the old like kung fu flicks? It's all choppy.
Someone is killing Jedi. It doesn't make sense.
Really? It doesn't make sense?
I sense the darkness.
Budget is always great. Always looks good.
All right, hey, pause that real quick. I love it already. Someone's killing Jedi. I don't understand. Why would people kill people in an age of light? Okay, so the guys who stand for goodness are being killed. Well, that's interesting. Why would anyone want to do that? Progress, like it. Yeah, it's. Are you establishing? Are they trying to establish? Are they trying to paint a picture for us first to then unseat us? Like, because if that's the narrative they go with through the whole thing, then I mean, like, that even shoots themselves in the foot. Like, if you're going to establish that good exists and evil exists, just to turn it on its head, which that's what's so frustrating. It's like, well, you know what? We're going to pause on that. Just keep going.
Yeah,
I'll get to that.
And we'll get into it. I think what the director says about that specifically, really to your point, I think we'll be able to address it.
This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it.
Okay, I'm sorry. I gotta make this isn't about good or bad. Who says good or bad? Nobody. Everybody says good or evil. Right? Like, this is to, it seems like it's an intentional to say, well, we're not going to say evil because evil is too on the nose, as if good isn't on the nose either. Right. This is,
well, the difference between good is so objective, but evil is evil. It's like the end of the spectrum.
Objective. Bad.
It's not perfect. This isn't about
objective
perfection. Yeah. No, they're like, this isn't about
bad
good.
Is like, right.
You see, even that's interesting because good is an approximation, right? Mm-hmm. Like evil is definite. right? But good is an
Mhm.
approximation, like in my view, at least the way that I hear that. And it's like, that almost even shows you that like, we know perfection is unattainable. Like we approximate it. We get as close as we can to what is good,
Mhm.
you know, what is,
Right.
you know, whereas, you know, evil is like definitive. Like there's no, like evil is just black. There's no gray in the phrase evil. Bad is relative. You know,
Well,
I had a
look at light,
bad day.
right?
Okay.
The
You had a bad
absence
day.
of
What does
light.
that mean? You know?
Right. No, exactly. I mean, the absence of light is darkness, right?
Right.
With just a little bit of light, it's no longer darkness, right?
Right.
It's just
There's no evil.
light,
There's no such thing
right?
as like
But there's no
partial
such as
evil.
some evil or some
Right.
darkness,
Evil
right? Like
is evil. Right.
It's almost like light is the standard, evil is the absence of the standard, and there's no kind of
There's no middle ground.
aggressive spectrum, right? Exactly. So
Right.
anyway, and then
But bad
the
is a
last,
misinterpretation. Bad is
right.
Yeah. Subject to interpretation.
And the real, I think, and I don't want to get too much into the politics on it, but at the same time, it's like this is about power and who's allowed to use it, and it's like, did they not see the South Park episode? I mean, like, it just feels like.
But even that it's about power and who's allowed to use it according to what standard,
right?
The good standard, the bad standard. If you don't believe in good or ideal, then what right do you have to power at all?
Right. Exactly.
Well, I would love to know by what state. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Let's go.
What is that?
It's the international symbol for bad guy.
Right. Red lightsaber. All right. I think that's it.
Dude, you know what's hilarious? The term acolyte is like a follower of a like religious order, okay? Of an order, right? So that means that what we have here is two fundamental competing understandings of the way the world is, which may be the only thing that they got right. But like the notion, like if they're going to try to take a postmodernist relativist view in this, but that alternative group of people have their own deep-seated convictions, and if they don't acknowledge that, then that's a huge problem. Because like I was just saying a second ago, like the very notion, like, well, there's no such thing as good or bad, only power and who is allowed to use it. Allowed, like what moral standard, what, like, this is always what's so frustrating when as a Christian, when people will say, okay, they'll try to use a Christian worldview to like make a value statement about Christianity, but they'll break the rules of Christianity in the process. You know what I mean? Like when they say, well,
they'll use a Christian standard to define their own morality without giving credit to God.
Right.
How do you
or
do
they'll
that?
say, yeah, but they'll judge under a standard without accepting the premise of the standard. Like if God is the moral foundation of Christianity and all that he is, like he is the very foundation of what is good or what is bad, then whatever he does is fundamentally good. Now he limits himself because he remains consistent with what he tells us. So if he tells us that something is good or something is bad, then he has to operate within that context.
Right.
But
divine command theory. Right.
Correct. Right. So but then people will come in and say, oh, well, you can't have that. Or, you know, yeah, it's just, so like this whole notion of like, you're entitled, the entitlement, but they're throwing away, they're raging against the system that grants them the entitlement, you know? Like,
right. It's like trying to claim any kind of moral objectivity without a standard in which sets that objective morality, right?
That
and
applies to everyone.
The consistent atheist or the consistent humanist or whatever who denies God as the moral authority really has to basically say that everything is relative. Nothing. There is no standard, right? It doesn't, and we can't judge based on that. And then you get into like the Sam Harris of like, well, we make our own morality. And I was like, okay, Nietzsche.
Good luck with that.
So yeah, exactly. Let's see if we can live consistently by that idea that everybody's morality is relative. Let me get into real quick the things that so Leslie Headland is the director, and I want to highlight something that she says in in this whole thing and talking about it. And this kind of really relates to what we just watched, or what we're really talking about. He's talking about the viewpoint or the narrative of the show. It says you're in the headspace of a lot of different characters. People who are good guys can be bad guys, and people who are bad guys can be good guys. Red flag. There's a lot of moral ambiguity, which is why Jodie's, or the actor's, line in the trailer is so important. This isn't about good or bad. This is about power and who is allowed to use it. And I believe, of course, that the Jedi are benevolent, well-intentioned institution, but they are an institution and they have amassed all the power. See the presuppositions that you automatically bring in, but they are an institution and they have all the power. So
right, but
interpretation
why
automatically evil, right?
Who says anyone else needs power? Like that's the should. So what are you suggesting, that that we should cede power to people who believe the opposite of what we do? Like this is a child's argument.
Right.
Like what is the purpose of, again, let's go back to paying attention in high school to like fundamental political theory. Like what is the purpose of government? To promote good and to punish or destroy or limit evil.
Right.
So this isn't about good or evil. It's about power and who's allowed to use it. Do you know what the government is? The licensed monopoly of force. That is what government is. It is the people who give the monopoly of violence against evil to a specific group of people to ensure that they objectively promote good and punish evil. So for a person who clearly believes something different than what the system or the established government believes, to look at the government and say, I don't think you should have all of the power because we believe something different. To which, like, the whole purpose of the government is to repress beliefs and value systems that are antithetical to their own, to protect their interpretation of good versus evil, like fundamentally.
Well, and that's how you muddy the waters, right? So if government's job is to promote good and defeat evil, all you have to do to destabilize that government is to destabilize the definition of good and evil.
Oh, 100%.
Then it's like, well,
what are we doing?
It a just institution? And I think that ultimately that's assumed, right? So the Jedi are an institution, and by default, institutions are eventually evil or are evil. That's the assumption, which is wild, right?
And I want to be, or did you have something that's on that? Or
no, I just wanted to kind of close in on that. Is the assumption that just because an institution, the Jedi, I mean, can you be any more pure? At least not pure, but like as it pertains to the story and the narrative and the world of the Jedi, right? Or of Star Wars. Like the Jedi are the standard for moral rightness throughout the New Hope, throughout the first 3 episodes of the first 3 movies, it isn't until the new rendition of Star Wars that we now need to put everything on its head and put everything into moral ambiguity and into question. It's like that's not the hero's journey. 1,
no.
2, that's not good storytelling. It confuses your audience and makes you walk away from a theater or a show going, I feel ugly. I feel dirty.
Yeah.
Like I am forced to root for somebody that it can't determine if they're actually right or wrong. Like what?
Do you know
what is that?
Yeah, it's so funny you say that, because I want to also be a little bit fair. So there's a reason the hero's journey narrative or the trope has survived as long as it has, because it speaks to part of the human experience, which is that, when you receive information, as you grow in the understanding of the way that the world is, and you come to some solid understanding of, or some if you're not familiar with the hero's journey, I don't know, Josh, can you pull that up while I talk about this other thing?
Yeah,
but if there's some diagrams of it.
I'll
a graphic. If you can grab one of those. So I'll lay this out real fast. So before while he's looking that up, I want to talk about this. I think it is, to be fair to the author, of like why we like movies or why we get tired of the good guy winning all the time, or why we're interested in seeing alternative, broadened anti-hero stories, is it's particularly important in this season of kind of like our society's history, because as a, you know, a millennial and whatnot, like the institutions that were elevated as being, yeah, that's perfect. The institutions that were elevated as being the protectors, the arbiters of good and whatnot, have largely failed society today by now. And we can talk about why that is 100 different ways from Sunday, but you know, the reason that people are frustrated with government, the reason that people are frustrated with organized religion, it's the tone of this, like, as you know, the fourth turning would talk about, like, you know, like this season we're in, is that frustration with that. And so that's kind of where this comes out. I think what's happening though is as we're moving into this like fourth turning where things are about to get bad, if they're not all, like, they're bad now, they're getting worse. As that happens, this is coming off as stale. And the reason it's coming off as stale and out of temperament is because it's about 8 or 9 years too late. Because right now, what people are feeling is the need to coalesce around common ideology. They're feeling the draw to collective values, to the protection in the society of like common beliefs, because they've now for the last several years been experiencing what happens when we get so divided. And so what I think we see here is, and I think that's why people have been very frustrated with Disney, has been because Disney's, you know, just the time it takes to get a movie into production, to do all of these things, like when all of these things got greenlighted and planned out, you know, 5 or 6 years ago, like people were still very much on board with, you know, like it was pre-COVID, basically going into COVID, which really kind of cracked the egg on like, hey, we don't like where this is going in the world and some of this ideology that's crept into our society. And as people are starting to come out of that, now these things that have been made and are now coming to market, they're coming off as tone deaf. And that's part of that, I think. And so yeah, if you bring up the hero's journey.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. That it was good to have it over here now. So I'll bring it up so I can show this. All right. So here you have, you know, in the most good storytelling takes place in 3 acts. Okay. Your first act is establishing things. So you have the ordinary world, right? Like we get introduced. This is Luke Skywalker on Tatooine. Hey, here's a kid. He's just like any other kid. And then you have a call to adventure. So something that happens.
Yeah.
Right. He finds these new droids, right? Or he goes and, you know, he finds
Obi-Wan
these new
says,
droids.
you know, I know your father, he was a Jedi, and let's leave Tatooine. Right.
Right.
And then he's like, no, like how can I do this? Right. Refusal.
Right? It's too hard.
I'm just a boy on Tatooine. Right.
Right. And then
he's
meeting of the mentor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in this case, and then crossing the threshold. So this is when, like, you know, he comes back and his house has been burned and he's forced off into the world. So what we look at that's in human existence, it's pretty straightforward. The ordinary world is you're growing up. You think you understand how the world works, and you have a call to adventure. So this is when you start to realize that there are things that there's tension and build up in the world that maybe didn't that contradicts your experience. So that's like deconstruction, right? And that's refusal of the call is where a lot of people spend their time, where they're just like, I know that there's injustice, but I'm concerned with my self-preservation. And so people languish in this place. But the point about this is that what the promise of this story is that if you don't languish, if you don't seek self-preservation, if you search to have integrity between the way you see the world and the way you believe what you understand of the world and the way you act, then that will push you over the threshold. And that's what pushes you into the second act, which is now you're rebuilding your worldview, you're rebuilding your life, you're testing theories about how you understand the world. So you have like tests and challenges, and
it's a clear distinction between good and evil, right?
Right. Because and that's the point, is that, but the point of the hero's journey is this kind of what I'm getting at with the distilling of good and evil, is that ultimately you get to this place called the reward, the seizing of the reward, where through a trial of some substantial means, a person, in this case, a hero, comes to an understanding of seizing the reward. They call it the elixir, right? Or in this case, for many of us, it's the understanding of a truth, the distillation of a truth, of a fundamental fact of the universe that you've determined, that of a piece of good or bad. This is the way the world is, or this is not the way that the world is. And then what happens with that? Is it just for the individual? Does the hero just say, I've got the thing, and then they just live on their own with it? No, that never happens. What happens in the third act? It's the application of that truth on the originating story. So the road back home, the resurrection and atonement, and the return with the elixir. So the returning with that and the application of that truth. This is why this resonates so much with humanity. And so, but for a lot of us, you see that over and over again, and because we fail to understand it, or we don't explore it, or we don't get talked about, and people don't have their own individual experience with it, it becomes trite. And you're like, that's not going to happen to me. Everyone's like, oh, I'm waiting for my Hogwarts letter. Like, it's that they feel like they're not paying attention, so they're missing how this happens in their own life. And what they want to see is something that resonates with their life. And so what you get is a lot of movies that are based in the first act, where the whole movie is based in the first act.
Make it to the second act.
Right.
Never.
They
Like,
sit
or you don't even
get
to crossing the threshold. You get to meeting the mentor, and then,
then we don't know if they're a mentor. Are they a mentor? Are they?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or most of the time, it's just refusing the call to say, well, that doesn't exist. Let me just make the best of what.
Is it a call? Is it
right?
really a call, or is that just the patriarchy?
Exactly. Questioning everything, right?
Just the patriarchy.
Yeah.
But
is that adventure or the patriarchy?
I think this is a great example,
Josh.
Honestly, yeah, I think this is a great example to really kind of tell the story, because when we come back to it, like, it really comes back to what Leslie Headland is really trying to convey here. I mean, we want to bring some activism into the show, or we want to blur the lines of good and evil. And you know what's interesting, right? And just to kind of head off some of the comments, which I want you to comment, disagree, but to head off the comments that say, well, wait, hold on. You guys are saying that an institution isn't corruptible, or you're saying that something that is good isn't also evil. The Jedi are not evil, or in some sense and way. Like, okay, look, first of all, we're talking about
maybe
the
ambiguity between.
Let me make this point real quick.
Yeah.
But like the difference between maybe there's a disagreement on how like government is established to defend good and to defeat evil. We're not talking about how we need to invite the Sith into the Jedi Council to destroy it. We're not talking about how we should let terrorists into Congress to go and destroy from,
Right.
I'm not saying that that's what's happening. I'm just saying, giving an example of like,
it's
that's
the
not what
ideas-
it's saying.
No, but that's what this is saying, is that the idea that they're putting across is that everyone should have the ability to, to enforce their will on other people, which Second Amendment argument there, right, to a certain level. But like the idea that, oh, no, certain ideas don't deserve any, or not certain ideas, what's the way I'm trying to say this?
When you define evil, right? There's a definition.
Like certain worldviews are antithetical to your worldview. You cannot say like we're going to allow everybody. Like everybody's view of the world is not correct. And spoiler alert: some people's view of the world is fundamentally in opposition to yours. And the result of you giving that room to breathe and or grow is your imminent destruction. Like
right. And the only way to accommodate, a diversity of worldviews when you have such extreme ones is that you have to have one dominant one, and then that dominant one gets to choose to what extent the others are allowed to coexist.
Accommodated. Correct.
Yeah. That doesn't, and while continuing to believe that they are antithetical. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to stop you from going into your little, satanic temple or whatever, but I'm not going to pretend that the things that you're teaching are, whatever.
The world doesn't have a problem with Muslim nations preventing other, worldviews from being represented in their government, right? Or in their concepts, right? But for some reason, in like the notion that we would say, like we've said this in other episodes, that we've stopped promoting. It's not just that we're not punishing evil; we're not promoting good. We're not
right. Well, yeah, we don't agree on what is good.
We're not defining good, and that's a fundamental problem in our society, and that's like
it's ironically it's the myth of the sort of Andalusian paradise where they say, well, no, the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians all lived in perfect harmony in Spain in the 10th century or whatever it was, and it was like, well, it's true that they were all present, right? But what you actually had was a dominant player who decided that they weren't going to just outright slaughter them.
Yeah.
you know,
And it's,
and then
you see it in every,
most of the time.
you see it in every paradigm, which is always, again, how we look at, like, how do we know that something's true? Well, when we look at it from 10,000 feet, does it look true? When we look at it from 5,000 feet, does it look true? When we look at it at a small scale, does it look true? Like, on the scale of international relations, hegemony
Are you saying that
equals
truth has a
peace.
fractal structure?
It's so weird, right? Yeah, it's like mathematical or something. You can literally look at it and say, like, hey, at the level of nation states, of countries, hegemony equals peace. A dominant power equals peace. At the level of states, look at China and Japan in the Warring States period. Look at these times when different ideas coexist with co-equal, basically with parity, basically, of their power structure, you end up with war and a constant state of war. And it's not until one of those things rises to become dominant that you see equilibrium.
Right.
Equal. And the same thing
And
is
they don't
true
go around
in the realm of
slaughtering
ideas.
everybody, because peace actually is its own reward, because it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's better, but it
It's nice.
requires
Yeah.
You know, it has that's the point. So, like, when we look at stories like this, and I think that's what is so frustrating. I watch this trailer and I just banging my head against the wall. It's just like, do they understand, like, the
End
impact?
of sentence. No.
Yeah. It's either nefarious, or it's, which it is, or it's just,
well, the problem
it's
is what
irresponsible.
what you're telling people, and the narrative that you're trying to, basically death by 1,000 cuts in changing the narrative of and the definitions of good and evil. If slowly over time you make people question what is good and what is evil, then there is nothing to fight for. There's nothing to live for. And so everything kind of gets gray. And that's where you're saying, like, well, now today they're talking about the value of determining, like, good and evil and coming together. It's like, it's too late. Like, we've already made everything relative. And it's like, this is the problem. Every time I have a conversation with atheists or people that aren't necessarily holding to a theistic moral, like, standard, they'll say, well, we make up our own morals. And my question is, okay, well, that's fine, but can you live consistently by that? Because you can't live consistently by determining, well, what's right for someone is wrong for somebody else, and vice versa.
And the people who believe that, who embrace that kind of relativism, will ultimately and always be defeated by the people who don't, who actually have a coherent, shared view of things.
Yes, we see that. Look at Occupy Wall Street. Look at any of these times when these relativistic organizations try to come together. It all, like, this is the fundamental thing about governance. You have to have common understanding of right and wrong. And here's the difference. If you look at two different movies, like, if you look at, there's a fundamental difference between movies like shoot, I had it and I lost it, but the idea that we can, Animal Farm, okay? Look at Animal Farm and look at this. All right? Like, if you wanted to challenge an institution's execution of authority, you do that by judging them against a unmoving standard of right and wrong, right? If the story you wanted to tell was one of these people hold themselves to be the greatest good and the arbiters of peace, but these people over here, you know, are equally good according to this external objective standard, or these people who are supposed to be good are acting out. Oh, some animals are more equal than others. Like, the pigs they're animals, so they're supposed to be acting on behalf of the other animals, but they're not. They're acting on behalf of themselves. Well, how do we know that? Because we can judge it by an objective external standard. Right. And what we see in stuff like this and in this common narrative is, you're not asking me to judge somebody's behavior based on another form of right and wrong. You're simply saying, these people didn't let me do what I want.
Yeah.
Like, well, that's fundamentally what I heard in this trailer.
Well, and to break it down, even apply it more towards Star Wars, right? You had Luke Skywalker as going through the hero's journey. He went through all episode 4, 5, and 6, right up to the Return of the Jedi, and he believes that there is still good in Vader, and Vader ultimately turns and says, you were right about me, right? And so the redemption story and the redemption arc of Darth Vader doing all this evil and then coming to see the light at the end. But then you have Rain Johnson, who apparently is Leslie Headland is just a huge fangirl of him.
An acolyte, you would say?
No, yeah, exactly right. So Rain Johnson directed The Last Jedi, which in my opinion was the nail in the already lowered coffin of the Star Wars franchise. And what Rain Johnson did to Luke Skywalker is an absolute travesty, because you have the man that went through a hero's journey that is the standard. And it's not like he didn't have content. I got books and books of all this, external universe, expanded universe content of Luke Skywalker building the New Republic and the new Jedi Order. I mean, it's beautiful, beautiful storytelling. And what does he do? He makes him a curmudgeon, a bitter man. Right, that doesn't like good and evil, and it's like this new generation of which represented by Rey to say, hey, here's the torch, teach me all the things, take me to the hero's journey, teach me. And he's like, there is no hero's journey, it's all nonsense.
Bring it up,
Nietzsche, right? It is an absolute travesty of what they have done to the franchise. And I think the people don't understand at its core. They're like, oh, we don't like what you did to Luke Skywalker. No, we don't like what you did to good and evil. We blurred the lines, and I can't sit here and enjoy a show where I'm forced to basically call what is good evil and evil good. It's horrible. Sorry, it's my rant.
And the interesting things about the ambiguity of good and evil, which has been done for a long time, but it's not because you just accept the relativism. It's what makes the drama there compelling is the need to untangle that in the actual situation. So when you create that moral ambiguity, it creates tension that you want to resolve by actually answering the question in some way. And sometimes you'll have characters who, at the end of it, they question the
thing they did.
Yeah. Like, did I make the right choice? But the underlying belief in the right choice still
was something to be pursued. Yeah. Josh, bring the hero's journey up again, because you made a really good point, and Tim was queuing up on that as well. But yeah, a really good point. Like, how do we undo? Like, why was it that I think a lot of people struggled with? And what is it about what he did to Luke that upset people? And that's it. Like, Luke went through the entire thing. He went through the ordeal. He found, reconnected with the Force. Came through as a person, right? Yeah, he returned with the elixir, and the knowledge that not only it is an elixir, but that it works. And then there's a difference between him and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Like, Obi-Wan Kenobi was lost, right? The thing that he strove for he became a Jedi, and everything that he was striving for was this task of establishing and this chosen one, right? And then he's given the chosen one, he's given that authority, but he doesn't get to see it fully manifest, right? And so that's why the mentor in this case is not the hero, right? Because he has not experienced the fullness of reality to bring it back in a meaningful way, to point the way forward to others, whereas Luke Skywalker did. And so then in this universe where there is a person who knows which way is up, there is a person who knows, like, compare Luke Skywalker should have been like Aslan. Like, Aslan knows all the answers. We don't know them. He doesn't tell them all of us. He speaks cryptically, but nobody's doubting that Aslan doesn't know which way's up and what we're going to do next.
Right.
And that's what Luke Skywalker should have been.
He doesn't know which way is up, right? In The Last Jedi.
Correct. He doesn't seem to understand how to solve this problem or what's
going on.
He's having an existential crisis.
Because his major moment at the end of the original trilogy was the kind of that stubborn, no, I believe there is good in him. And I am going to commit to that. And then to just turn around and be like, maybe this 12-year-old needs to die, though.
Maybe good and evil's not real anymore. It's like, did you not learn anything? I mean, it's like, to be fair, maybe we shouldn't be so critical because maybe it is more accurate. I mean, I'm getting real big Israel vibes off of Luke Skywalker throughout what's it called, The Last Jedi. So it's kind of like, you guys don't know, you don't know which way's up. Have I not done enough for you? No, I'm
put
just
more context in a biblical context rather than the political context on that, Josh.
yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Geopolitical. You
Yeah,
know.
not
Right.
Israel, the modern nation. I mean, ancient Israel in the
Right.
Bible, for the record. But like, yeah, you know,
See
like
both ways.
here's God going like, did I not like carry you out of Egypt? Have I not provided you with all these things? But meanwhile, here's Israel. You know, is Luke Skywalker drinking green milk on some rock in the wilderness, all poopy pants that they don't know which way's up, and like.
Bro, that
So
was,
maybe
that was
we
the
shouldn't be
death,
so
right,
upset.
when he took the milk out of
The
the teat
swig
of that
of
weird
the green milk.
the green, and I'm just like, what are
Really?
we watching?
Is this what we're doing here?
Like, what is this?
Maybe
Sorry,
that's why it's so frustrating, because it's what we actually are. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that's what's so frustrating, is that like the hero's journey is the idealistic. It's the reality of like, hey, that's how it's supposed to work. That's what we should be doing. And yet, like,
Yeah, but it depends on where you end the story, right?
yes, for sure.
Where are you on that circle
Acts
when you
1,
stop?
2, or 3, for sure. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
And so they're just
Exactly.
they walked him halfway back around the circle, and then just he died.
And I'm
Yeah.
so frustrated because it could have been such the premise of the like not the premise, excuse me. The story I was promised was finally getting a look behind the mirror of evil. Like, because there's something to be said about understanding evil. That I could have been behind. Like, there's a reason I love scary movies. There's a reason why scary movies have always been popular, even though Christianity and the church isn't. Is because evil has a really good way of telling us what good is, right? We can understand evil.
And it's
Like,
got a
that's
great branding department.
it does. It does. But like, I mean, that's where like that's where the whole like, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like duality of existence gets its footing in society, because instinctually, like you said, you can understand light better in the presence of darkness.
Well,
I mean,
and
that's why
what
we
makes-
buy OLED TVs.
And what makes really cool villains is how self-assured they are. They've basically gone around that same circle on the dark side, right?
Yeah.
They're not self-doubting what they
No.
should do. They're not, and that's why you have like your Darth Vaders and your Emperor Palpatines. Like they're not concerned
They have
about their
integrity.
place in the universe. Yeah, right. They're internally consistent. That's what makes
Correct.
them so effective and
Yes.
so respectable as villains, right?
Yes.
And the best ones, and this wasn't really so much in Star Wars, but a lot of times you'll find ones who are obviously assured of their own goodness, but are in fact wrong. Which
Right.
flies in the face of the relativistic viewpoint, because it's like, no, it doesn't matter what you're framing, what your own internal narrative of your actions is. You
Right.
are going to get killed by the actual hero because you are wrong.
Right,
Right.
because the proof is in the pudding. Like, that's the whole point of the journey, is that like, yeah, what you need is both. That's why conviction based on, you know, a proper alignment with reality and experience is like, that's the mother of all leaders. Like, that's what we all strive. That's the person we want to follow. Like, that's the
Michael Carpenter, baby.
that's
Yeah.
it. We just need.
Yeah,
But
man.
if you don't have that, like, and that's where you can mine that for so much content, because the fool is the guy who has all of the conviction and all of the truth in the world, but is completely wrong about the way the world is.
Right,
And then there's
right.
the tragic. You know, that's the tragedy, right? But then you have the anti-hero who, you know, is this person who believes in something that is wrong, but does so with clarity and conviction that other people who believe the right thing can't seem to stomach or muster. You know, the willingness to do things that people would even consider evil because it's right. Like, or something that is so hard, like what bends and breaks the human will to do something morally reprehensible. Like, someone who can push those boundaries has a genuine sense of conviction that the majority of people floating through life with no sense of understanding of which way is up or down, they look at that and they are just in awe.
Well, that's
Because
your
they're
cult
like,
leader
what is
mechanic.
that like? That's it.
You
And
know?
they want to know what that's like.
Yeah. Right.
Which is why when people hear, you know, I was even looking at one of the comments in our previous videos, and he's like, it's always so good to get such an like a window into, you know, people who have such extreme views on society. And I was just like,
This is like the most milquetoast version of me ever.
ask them. Like, I am on my best.
Do you know how
behavior.
much we? I know. Do you know how much we would have to bleep if we broadcast like 60
Oh my
seconds of the
goodness.
pre-show?
I know.
Can't do it. So what I'm
Yeah.
saying is that's what is hilarious to me, is that this is like a celebration of
Extreme.
mediocrity. Like, and they're like, look what we made. Isn't it so mediocre?
Right.
Yeah.
Is it not?
Well, think about this.
It says nothing while saying everything about something that we don't know what it is.
Oh man.
Right.
Like,
Well,
so
I think
mysterious.
also it's
Even
when
Russell Brand is a Christian now. It's done.
what is going on like with the world, right? Like a lot of that's a crazy thing. I mean, I'm waiting.
He's
like
the chosen
Jordan Peterson
one.
is basically there. I'm waiting for
We thought it was
Joe Rogan
Kanye.
to
We were
finally
wrong.
convert. Nope,
Joe's
it wasn't
coming.
Conway.
Uncle Joe wasn't
that ain't
Kanye.
it. That ain't it. But
We
like,
stopped in chapter 1. He's in act 1 still.
We're just gonna start
man.
categorizing people by their
Right.
we're
Where
just
they're
gonna keep
at.
little
We're just gonna
dartboard,
bring
with
that
a
up.
little name
Hero's
pin.
journey. They
like in Grand what's it called? Shoot, not the Grand Tour, but the BBC show about cars that I can't think of
Top
now.
Gear.
Top Gear, where they've got where they rank in the celebrity thing. We're just going to be like, he's still in Act 1. We've got him in Act 2.
So think about
Act 3, home stretch.
Josh,
Good to go.
When we think about like the depravity of the situation of the world, and then when truth is exposed and how people are just drawn to this truth. And it's funny, it's like it doesn't even have to be real truth. It could just be seeming truth, and they're like, wow, there's an actual standard on things, right? I think back into like the situation in the Old Testament with Israel when Josiah finds the finds the Torah, right? Finds the law, and everyone's like, oh, like, and which is another thing. It's like it says that Josiah, they found the law, right? They found the writings of Moses, and it's like, whoa, how bad was Israel going? They weren't even following.
They
the
didn't know where it
Torah.
was. Yeah, they're just like, we're on our own plan.
Lost in the library somewhere. But that's the thing. You got a society that was practicing syncretism, where they were sacrificing to Yahweh, and then giving their children to Baal and banging the drum beat so nobody could hear the screams, right, of the child being burned alive. And then the moment that they're like, no, that's not good, here's the law, and everyone's like, whoa, a standard.
If only there was a sign.
Right.
Well, it's like, it's
are we the baddies?
Yeah. People are they're looking for somewhere to put solid footing. Like, that's the hilarious, and that's why I was saying I feel like this is, it's coming off as tone deaf. Because what we're seeing in society, even amongst people who aren't even particularly religious, is that even they're willing to accept that relativism is wrong. Like, you can't, everyone can't be right.
And you can't live your life
all
that
roads
way.
don't
No matter
lead
how
to
much of
Rome.
a philosophically sophisticated relativist you are, you do not live your life as a relativist.
No, you don't. And that's what's
promise.
hilarious. Like, that's what you see. And so then what happens now is people are just tired of it because it's not a novel concept anymore, because we're not in that season. Like, it was a novel concept when everyone was an establishment, square in the 50s, and like saying something else seemed like new revelation, like, hey,
so
it's not Smallville. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're not leaving and coming back in color. You know what I'm saying? Or, that's not how they became in color.
Kansas,
in that movie.
but
But anyway, whatever it was. But the point is like, that's not, the elixir isn't rebellion in this season. Like, what's going to happen now, what you're going to start seeing more of is people are going to be drawn to collectivist, populist, centrally dominant theme focused material, because they want to hear messages of confidence and, deliberate direction. And that's
let
what
me
we
give
saw.
you a great example of that, because
hipsters.
The writer of
let's go back to what worked.
Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
Sorry, go. I stepped on you. Go ahead.
The writer of Watchmen, right? He made Rorschach to be this contemptible, like, he was kind of his punching bag for his, philosophy, and he's really upset about how much that character resonated with people and how much they like him, because he is the character of uncompromising moral certitude, whereas the narrative was intended to glorify this, morally compromising ends justify the means kind of thing. And yet, even in the hands of a writer who's expressly trying to ridicule these principles, it still shines through, and it's like, no, we like that guy.
Exactly.
That's it, though. But that's totally it. It's because that's what resonates. It's like, it's literally just like music. It's the note that resonates in the era. Like, there's lots of notes playing in the chord, but one of them just sticks out. And that is what I think is going on. That's what feels, I think that's why there was such a vehement reaction to Acolyte, is that that chord rang out and everyone was like, that's not part of the music we're here for. Like, and even if they couldn't, and I think that's why the commentary, we pointed out a lot of little different things, but like, that's fundamentally what the problem is. And I think it's frustrating. It's got to be so frustrating. It has to be so frustrating if you're like a progressive, liberal, you know,
and a lot of things are frustrating.
Who,
if
right,
you're that.
But even for them, because I would argue, because I've even heard people on that side of it, they're frustrated and they don't know why. And can you imagine? They can't even say why, because if they criticize it, they're criticizing their own adopt robot. It's like, I'm upset about this, but I can't judge it by any objectable standard.
Right.
So I can't say anything apart from the fact that I don't like it.
Right. Well, and it's the same concept of how, you know, communist regimes eat their own. It's the people that are, or, you know, the people that are crying revolution that ultimately get swallowed by that very revolution. Right.
Yeah, it's a fury spiral.
Yeah, exactly. So, but anyway, like that's it. One thing that I do want to also touch on, and this is more from like a fanboy stance, is like, man, like the way that Leslie Hanlon went about writing this and doing this, she brought in, and this is really kind of going into destroying the lines of good and evil and saying, like, I'm going to create it and rewrite the story of what good is and what evil is. She brings in a writer that has never seen Star Wars, that hasn't read anything Star Wars. And the thing about it,
because it's just wrapping paper for whatever ideas they want to put forward.
That's it.
I mean, now that's not to say that there weren't, you know, writers that have seen Star Wars in this, but, you know, at the same time, it's like you don't bring somebody in that says, oh, I'm going to go ahead and see how I can change it without any understanding of what the foundational good is. In fact, one of the things that she said in that was like, I've never seen it. I think, isn't there a dog in it? But I don't know anything about it. She's like, is there a dog in it? And it made me think. I was like, wait a minute.
Said the quiet part out loud.
Right. What is she thinking about Star Wars that might also be related to a dog? And immediately
Jar Jar Binks,
I'm thinking,
shut up.
I'm immediately thinking John Candy and Spaceballs. Like, if that's her reference, I'm just like, is this her reference? This writer literally wrote Star Wars: The Acolyte with the understanding of Star Wars based on Spaceballs, which honestly, this is far better than anything that they've come out with in, you know, the last 5 years. Dude. Right? Like, but like, that just kind of makes me laugh.
That's right.
Right? Like, you kind of start to have to question, right?
But you already said it right there. They that's what's hilarious. They did the same thing with Snow White, and they're literally, it's the same playbook. It's like, you said the quiet part out loud. You bought IP, which you could have used to surreptitiously sneak your ideology in by not acknowledging it and just being like, we thought it was a really good idea. Oh, we're sorry. But no, you went out and you felt so self-confident that the whole world was with you that you said the quiet part out loud. You said, oh, no, we don't really care about the IP or any of this. No, this is literally just like, we want to challenge people's ideas about what good and evil are and what right and wrong are. Oh, we want to challenge, you know, gender ideology and like
people are just
transitions.
tired of it. It's like, you know, I'm actually kind of tired of like you constantly challenging the ideas of right and wrong and being subversive. And it's like, look, guys, even if it was clever sometimes, because there are a few things that actually do that with a level of sophistication that's interesting.
Right.
But now they're just doing the same ham-handed version of it over and over and over again.
It's on the nose. They're basically taking everything that was traditionally like a male superhero with Disney, and then, well, let's do a woman version of it. And then there was this big thing of the Force is female. And it's like, okay, well, let's just don't be so, like, don't force it down, you know, the storytelling mind, you know, like, why do you have to do this? And I think ultimately it's interesting with this is look at the poster here, right?
Oh my gosh. I'm just going to cut. Hey, so that basically wraps up our review. We kind of got to the main part. I'm not going to tell you why Josh is laughing really hard because, frankly, goodness. I can't. If we want to have a future in this.
Well,
so
listen.
we're really glad you guys joined us today. And if you enjoyed our commentary, please subscribe.
I'm not glad I joined today now. I'm not.
Can we just acknowledge that we just totally you jumped into the recording and we're like, yeah, he's here now. Like, we didn't say, oh, hi, Tim.
It's just like, well done.
We just went right into it. That's awesome.
What are we talking about?
Yeah.
All right.